stupid Canadian wolf bird.
When you spend just about every single day of this last month turning this scene of heated rivalry into an elaborate piece of fan art in the form of a rug, you'd be remiss not to make a video about it. Especially when said rug is for charity, which means you watching right now, this rug could be yours. So to celebrate this You Holy Pride Month, please join me in cracking open a ceremonial can of ginger ale with the brand name conveniently covered, a la Shane Hollander. ASMR, let's see if this works. This is my one try at doing this. So, one of my best friends sent me a tweet from Cutie Cinderella, well-known streamer, who was looking for crafters and makers to donate goods for a charity auction that she was holding for Pride Month. I didn't know about this. I don't have Twitter or X the Everything app, but my attitude for most things is to just go for it. Like, who cares if I'm stupid and straight and shameless, and that it once took me 15 minutes to figure out how to turn off my own car? And so I filled out her form, and alongside many others, she also picked me. And at this point, it was the end of April, which meant that I had just a little bit over a month to prepare and send over my promised crafted goods, which were 2 punch needle rugs. I wanted one to be Pride themed, so why not make a rug based off of the worldwide sensation gay hockey romance, which my Canadian tax dollary dues happily paid for? So I decided to make a heated rivalry themed punch needle rug, based off the line Stupid Canadian Wolf Bird, which Ilya says at the cottage. It's a loon, which makes it generic enough for people to just appreciate aesthetically, but it's also a really fun reference for the knowers. And this is the most important part, I can't get copyrighted for it, because how are you even gonna copyright a bird? Not that Rachel Reed would. I think she seems very nice and not like the type of person to send out lawsuits left and right. But how even would you? The loon doesn't even show up in the show. So what you're watching right now is me tracing the rug with a black Sharpie. It's 61 by 91 centimeters or 2 by 3 feet. And it's a swimming loon framed by a border of leaves, which in turn are bordered by a border of squares, which I intended to make a rainbow of colors, kind of like sun catchers in a cottage. Okay, forget all of the people who might see this online, because, can I be honest, I don't know if you guys are real. I do like the theory of all of you being hamsters, and you guys are spinning on the wheels, and you guys are like using the energy from the wheels to power a bot farm. I think that's really funny. But I know for a fact that at least 12 people are gonna see this rug in person, which is 12 more than how many people usually see my rugs in person. So I needed to knock people's socks off. And what blows people's minds in person is depth and texture. Seeing and feeling the rug, the fibers, the depth, and the plushness. I actually didn't have all of the yarn colors I needed for this rug. For those of you that don't know, I order my rug straight from the source in rural New Brunswick. Shout out Briggs & Little, probably the only good thing to come out of New Brunswick. So while I waited for that yarn to arrive, I got started on the leaf border with the yarn I already had. I was gonna make these leaves maple leaves, but it felt too on the nose, like, we get it, you're Canadian. So I did these really cute oak looking leaves instead. I used the spun variegated yarn to punch this leaf border. I liked the way that it made it look like the leaves were rustling. Luckily, Canada Post pulled through and saved me from having to ramble about leaves for 10 minutes because my yarn came in the next day. This, esteemed viewers, is packing brilliance. I took my car to the post office to pick my yarn up because I ordered not 5, not 10, but 20 skeins of yarn. I went in expecting the worst, almost certain that the very nice lady working there would come out rolling a pallet and just say good luck. But I was pleasantly surprised to see all 20 skeins of yarn efficiently packed into one very actually easily carryable bundle. So I finished punch needling the rest of the leaf border, snipped off enough yarn ends to probably untwist, card, and spin into a brand new Frankenstein's monster skein, and got started on what you all clicked on this video for. The focal point of this rug is our stupid Canadian wolf bird, our beloved common loon. And what better way to highlight it than bestowing upon it my most time-consuming and messy punch needle technique. That's right, we are sculpting this loon. I'm starting from the backmost feathers of the loon and then gradually moving forward and increasing the length of my punch needle as I do it. We're starting off with the Oxford 8 Fine, which will make the tallest loops out of all of the Oxford punch needles. Sculpting is a constant process of punching and then flipping my behemoth of a frame around, and then individually clipping my loops one by one, and then punching again, clipping, punching, clipping, punching, clipping, punching, and then, when I finally have a section finished, I can bring out my selection of nightmare scissors, like I'm some sort of a mad scientist, and start carving the yarn out to get the exact shape I want. It really is mad scientist behavior, but instead of coming out with 3 cartoon superhero sisters who fight monkeys wearing hats and literally Satan, I come out with rugs of elephants wearing bandanas and a vague idea of a loon. Now, if you're new here, you might be asking, Brenda, where's the gun? Where's the gun? The machine that you see everywhere on TikTok that feeds yarn through and then it goes like brrrr. Yeah, folks, that's tufting. How do I explain this without shading tufting and tufters? You know what, who cares? We all know I secretly love being problematic anyways. Tufting is basically an industrial fast fashion version of punch needle and traditional rug hooking. That is literally why it was invented. The stuff that comes out of tufting, by and large, is of worse quality than punch needle because, among other reasons, you have to use glue to seal it from the back. This means that tufted rugs can never be repaired. Glue also degrades the yarn and fabric, so tufted rugs don't last as long either. I like punch needle and traditionally hooked rugs because there's care taken into every single stitch. You know that a person has picked up the needle with their hands and individually made every single stitch that you see. There's also far less yarn waste, and the rugs can last generations and can also be repaired if needed. People buy punch needle and hand-hooked rugs because they know that there's a real person behind it all from start to finish. It's about as anti-AI of a craft as you can get. Yarn dyeing day, maybe 1 out of 3 or 4 days that I spent dyeing yarn. Not exclusively, but a significant portion of the day was dedicated to it. I woke up excruciatingly early for this because let me tell you something, bulk yarn dyeing is a real pain in the tuchus. So much time, so many calculations, so much protective equipment that I have to put on to make sure that I'm safe. And the plan for that day was simple. I wanted to dye the yarn that would be used for the water background of the loon. And I wanted 2 different blues. One that was more on the cerulean side, and one that was more of an icy blue. So I heated up my water, added citric acid, added the dye, added the yarn, waited for the yarn to absorb the dye, waited for the water to cool down, washed the yarn, dried the yarn, and then, and only then, was I able to start punching with it. Shout out to the Woolly Mason jar dye system. I basically learned everything I needed to know about dyeing yarn from them. And actually, now that I think about it, it's the other good thing that, that comes out of New Brunswick. And while I waited for my yarn to be ready to use, I continued my work on the loon. I brought out my Craftsman punch needle to punch the longer loops needed for the neck and the head. Guys, this needle is 100 years old. I'm not even joking. And not only does it look like a medieval torture device, using it feels like a medieval torture device. It is so unergonomic. I was starting to fear that my wrists would spontaneously gain speaking abilities and beg me to cease this madness. Luckily for my still silenced wrists, I finished the loon and then started punching some of the water. I just wanted to get a little bit in so that I could lock the loon into its proper place to start some more detailed sculpting. I like taking my rug off the frame for this, and with a little bit of steam pressing first, of course. It helps to be able to manipulate the fabric freely without the constraints of the frame, to really get in there with my scissors and sculpt the yarn so that the loon looks like a loon and not how a plane looks like to me with my contacts off. Okay, we are awake pretty early in the morning because today is an experiment day. For the border of our rug here, I want to do kind of a muted rainbow, so not super bright colors. I kind of want it to mimic the look of like a sun catcher that you would find at a cottage. And so to get that, we're gonna have to do some experimenting. I woke up at the crack of dawn and soaked a bunch of yarn that we are going to kind of experiment with and see. Everything's fine. We're gonna experiment and we're going to see how we can get these yarn colors to be a little bit more muted, a bit more subdued. So we have red, we have orange, we have yellow, we have green, blue, purple, and pink. So to kind of better inform my experimentation process, I first took a picture of all of my yarn colors and then desaturated the photo using like the camera app or whatever. And I did that to see if the colors were in the same value. Everything except for the yellow and orange were kind of on the same level, and the yellow and orange were quite a bit brighter. So what I was thinking was that we could do this dyeing experimentation in batches and then just do some math to figure out the exact amounts of dye that we'll need to get the look that we want. And we are going to be using chestnut brown and black as part of our experimentation process to see, well, how much of these colors we need to get our yarn kind of muted. So let's give this a try. I actually never used my kitchen stove to dye before. I usually just use a portable stove, but I felt pretty confident now that I wouldn't spill anything. And the kitchen stove doesn't make the wacky noise that my portable stove makes, which I conveniently mute for the sake of my beloved viewers. 1/8 of a teaspoon of chestnut brown. Another thing that I muted for my sweet, sweet viewers is hours and hours of me narrating how much dye I use for every single one of my yarns. The ancient recipes must never be lost, even if I write them down on a notepad that a real estate agent sends us every single year. I don't even know this guy. How does he know me? How does he know where I live? Who's telling him? As I waited for my yarn to dry up, I decided to maximize the very limited time that I had by doing my first big move on my gripper frame. I've got my frame, my steam-pressed rug in its partial completedness, and some old towels. I'm using the towels to cover up the grippers so that we can position the rug without the rug latching onto them. Okay, this is as straight as it's gonna get for now. But this is fine because we're only gonna do this corner first before moving on, so it doesn't really matter that those edges over there are kind of wonky. That's chill. As long as this corner is nice and straight, we are good. And not too long after. So here are our overdyed colors. See, we got that orange and yellow nice and dark to match the rest of these. And we are going to punch with them. Obviously, we'll need a lot more because we have an entire border to go through, but I'm glad that we got this experimenting done and we have some samples. So when we dye more, we'll know how much dye to add. I'm using an Oxford 8 regular for the border here. I want it to stand out and also be nice and squishy to step on. After punching wacky things like leaves with a million curves in them, and snipping and poking every piece of yarn that makes up the loon, It just felt so good to be punching something square, but knowing me, like, I got bored punching 3 squares in, which is why I also got started on the brown background here. And folks, I don't know if you can tell, this brown is heathered. It has little flecks of different colors in it, making it rainbow. Like, are you seeing this? I feel like the camera isn't doing this yarn justice. But let me tell you, the way the little flecks of color pop out from the brown and then they match up with the rainbow and the border. Chef's kiss, no notes. We've got one corner of our rug done. Now it's time to move it on our gripper frame. I yanked the rug off my frame with the force of 1,000 suns, steam pressed it with a wet towel in my iron, and then waited for it to dry. Beauty is pain. And you'll see why, because at some point in this video, I cut my fingy on a gripper while I was moving my rug, and then returned with a band-aid. It happens all the time. I'm heavily considering making an investment purchase of chainmail gloves, specifically for use with my gripper frame. It would spare me the cuts, and plus, they look sick. I rethreaded a tail of yarn I previously left, and then continued punching my border. I like doing this because it means that there is no way to tell where I moved my gripper frame. But I do a mix of this and then staggering my punching because leaving behind tails means a lot more bulk, which you can see in this clip. At this point, I was just happy that the rug was coming out so well. This was a pretty quick turnaround for me. I was halfway done and happy that there were no huge, horrible mistakes so far. After a quick steam pressing, we were on to corner number 3. The color scheme, besides the rainbow border, for some reason it's giving like Garden of Eden Renaissance painting, at least until you see the loon making a face like it ruins the immersion. Or maybe it just makes it better. Honestly, my main worry at this point was something that in the wool world we call vegetable matter. What this is that it's basically just grass and hay that I have to pick out of my yarn because it gets stuck in there. Sometimes I see it when I'm winding my yarn, sometimes I see it right before I'm punching, and other times I don't even see it until I've already punched my piece and I'm looking at it from the front. But apparently, and I was today years old when I learned about this, vegetable matter is a good thing. It means that the sheep from which the wool came are out in the pasture and they get to roam freely, plus that the processing of the wool is sustainable. Actually, I'm lying a little. I knew that Briggs & Little took good care of the way they processed yarn and they took care in finding good sources of wool, but I wasn't completely sure on the ins and outs of this stuff. So for any viewers that were worried about the sheep, do not worry. I still picked as much of the vegetable matter out of the yarn as I could. So now, this is all we have left to do. I've been sending my friends photo updates in our group chat because everyone is very invested in this rug, the video, the whole situation that's going on right now. And what you're seeing right now is something that I emphasize a lot in Punch Needle. And I've also heard this being said in other fiber arts as well. And it's that the back of your work should look as good as the front. You can't hide your mistakes behind half a pail of latex glue and not expect me to ask questions about it. Now we are at our last section of this rug. We're not doing anything different here, just punching up the border and the inside background section. It did feel good to be done with all of those yarn ends though. For so much of this project, I had been carrying over yarn ends to continue punching on the next section and the section after that, and now it's finally over. As my rug got heavier and heavier the more I punched, the arm workout of flipping my frame back and forth to snip off my yarn ends was honestly much appreciated, even if I only did it a few times per section. I finished up snipping off the very last yarn ends I had on this rug, and now it was time to start hemming. So we're gonna start off by giving this rug a big steam press. I had to wet my towel twice to make this happen, and if you notice here, I'm not pressing anywhere on the loon. I want it to keep its 3D shape and not get flattened. The very unfortunate thing about hemming this rug is that the best way to measure out my hems is by doing it in inches. I know, it's very un-Canadian of me, but listen, it really is just easier. Measuring out 2 inches and 3/4 of an inch is way easier than measuring 5 centimeters and 1.9 centimeters. Feel free to argue with me in the comments about this. I measured out 2-inch points on each side of my rug, and then just drew a straight line with my pencil in the groove of holes in my mugs cloth, as well as measuring 3/4 of an inch for every single one of the corners. I cut the hems out along the lines, and then ironed them all into place. I took out the many T-pins I use and pinned the hems into place for hemming. And I'm using button and craft thread here. I like how strong it is, as well as how invisible the stitches look when I make them. I started off on some random spot on a side, and then worked towards the left, whip stitching every 1/2 inch. I stitched up the corners with a ladder stitch, and then took my needle under to the next side to continue whip stitching. I've done this in so many of my videos before, so I think my regular viewers are pretty tired of me talking about it. But I think it's important to mention, because I want people to see and know how much care I put into my rug making when every single step is done to maximize use and longevity. Once I was done hemming, my final step was to give it a little press one more time and go over it with a sticky roller and lint remover. And we're done, with 2.5 weeks to spare. Folks, you gotta believe me when I say that the camera does not do this rug justice. It looks so cool and fun, and would be such a funky addition to your space. And it can be, because this rug is being auctioned off for charity, alongside my Octagram View sample rug, because I literally did not need that thing. These rugs are 2 of the many crafted goods that are being auctioned off at Cutie Cinderella's Great Gay Bake Sale and Craft Auction. The craft show bit will be broadcast live on Twitch, I'm pretty sure, as well as YouTube maybe. And all of the proceeds from this event will be going to Rainbow Railroad, the Trevor Project, and Point of Pride. I actually don't have a date for when this auction is going to happen, presumably very soon. I'll put up a pinned comment or maybe make a community post when I get a date, so please subscribe so you know when that happens. Hopefully my rug gets there on time because it is currently still in US Customs. I'm honestly just happy to be supporting a good cause and hope that everyone gets the chance to see some of the other awesome crafted items that are up for auction, because there's some really cool stuff that the other makers are sending in. I wish I had time to do more, because if you know me, you know I make way cooler things as well. I already showed y'all the expedition. This was my punch needle certification rug, but I'm also working on this orchid mantis rug. Ooh, wow, bugs! But thank you for watching until the end. Happy Pride. I'll see you later.